Hey, another DLC on the horizon. We are coming to tech. You know what that means? We're coming close to the release date. Now we're going to talk about stuff that happens in the back end that you don't really see, that's really important, that makes the game work really efficiently and really well, but sadly does not get a lot of love. Today, we're going to give it some love. And here we are, the Tech Dev Diary. My understanding is there's a lot of old platforms, like for instance old OS for Linux, Mac, and Windows, that have to be constantly updated to keep working efficiently with Hearts of Iron 4. So what eventually they have to do is discontinue some of the older OSs. And as you can see, a few older Mac OS versions as well as Linux have dropped off. However, Windows 7 and Windows 10 and 11 obviously still work. Makes a mention that Windows 7 does currently work, but just for the time being. Is anyone using Windows 7? Can someone tell me in the comments below? Why are you still on Windows 7? Come on, guys, get with the times. Up to date. I'm looking at you. That guy who cares about security but doesn't update Windows. What's wrong with you? That's like having a really secure door, but you leave it constantly unlocked. New defaults! So now it will use DirectX 11 to launch as default. This was introduced in the last patch. It resulted in a slightly quicker loading speed when you boot the game up. The reason why they didn't want to make this the default, they were worried that some bugs may occur on a big release. Turns out there wasn't many issues, so they're going to make DirectX 11 the default now. This won't make any graphical differences. This is just how the backend works, and it will avoid any kind of graphical glitches, which they said they experienced them. I do recall seeing those, but man, they were really rare. This is, I bet, the bit that most of you are waiting for. The usual question is, will the new patch make the game run faster than the previous version? And I'm happy to say the answer is yes. One of the issues with performance with Hearts of Iron 4 is they may optimize old code with some of the old features of the previous expansions, but then they introduce the new features that AI has to work on, let's say the supply system, and they necessarily may slow the game down. So they constantly have to go back and forth over old patches to optimize every single way the AI performs, as well as a lot of the back-end new code for the new features. So one of the biggest improvements we've made to the map icon rendering. Unit counters, factories, supply hubs, you name it. The number of icons potentially displayed on the map has grown a lot since Hoi 4's original release 6 years ago, and the historical algorithm wasn't cutting it anymore. For example, here is what the FPS and frame time look like on the Avalanche patch on my work desktop. The i7-7700, GTX 1060, VSync is off 150 FPS cap. So FPS and frame time, let's look more closely. Frame time is 6 ms. FPS, where's that? 106 frames per second. Right, so this is showing how the graphics are making the FPS drag significantly. And this is the big improvement. So this is showing it zoomed out, and this is zoomed all the way out, I guess, with 75 FPS, showing the entire world. So we've got another one here, fully zoomed in at 5 speed. We have ticks per second, about 27. FPS is 41, which is exceptionally higher than it used to be. You used to get around about 20 FPS at 5 speed. And then there's an example showing you the different numbers here. You're getting 85 frames per second. Paused on the old patch, fully zoomed in. So it looks like an extra 20, 30, 40 FPS. I think the significant improvement here is to show that how high the FPS is while running at 5 speed. That's the big jump for me. I understand this isn't Hoi, but CK3 is the best game at the moment for performance when it comes down to all the map games. When you run at 5 speed, you're constantly getting a high FPS and the game is running really, really quickly. For me, FPS isn't always a big deal. I always take it down to how quick a day goes by in real time. I feel like, for instance, when you're playing mid-late game, your days take like an average of 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 10 seconds to go. That really slows down the playability because you reach a certain point, the game is chugging along so slowly. I feel like it reduces some of the enjoyment of the game as well. From my perspective, you can get a solid 4 speed that runs consistently the same speed throughout the whole game. I'd accept it maybe late game. It would dip a little bit, but that would cut out that kind of late game fatigue that you get when playing Hoi 4. And some other kind of map games as well, like EU4 is particularly really bad at it as well. Note that the Barbarossa denotes rendering performance in render time rather than frame time, which is only the GPU part, while Avalanche counts both CPU and GPU rendering time. Some of the numbers look different. And another one, we've got fully zoomed in, 5 speed at 19 ticks per second. Frame rate is about 30 FPS, which once again is definitely an improvement over the old version. One thing I would like to see is performance differences, which comes down to more low-end rigs and more high-end ones, because there's not really any benchmarks for Hearts of Iron 4 like there are from potentially some other larger AAA titles. I presume that's kind of a slightly more high-end CPU, but the GPU is kind of slightly older. So I suppose if you're running like mid-tier or mid to low-tier gear, you're going to probably find that this expansion is going to give you decent improvements. Since Paradox Games from the Hoi generation tie up rendering and game simulation, this will translate in a faster tick speed, on top of a few smaller performance optimizations we've added to the simulation itself. To be clear, faster rendering does not translate perfectly to in-game speed. It mostly means a more fluid experience when playing, especially on pause in Speed 4.5, and then some improvements to the speed of the game simulation. So this is just what I originally thought. It's not going to result in actual faster game time. It's going to result in just overall more smooth experience because you're getting higher FPS. I have read and seen a bunch of guides to Hoi performance over the past months, showing tips and tricks on how to improve the game speed. So let me give you mine. Consider disabling VSync in your graphics settings unless you have a high refresh rate monitor. I think at the moment most gamers do have high refresh rate monitors. I presume that's anything with 3 digits, right? Like 144 and higher. The way the game simulation waits for the rendering to be done to continue, with a slow refresh rate, your CPU might end up rendering precious time waiting on your monitor's VSync, which is not ideal. The root of this issue is difficult to address on the Hoi 4, especially with DirectX 9, but with DirectX 11 it becomes the default. We will see if there is any way we can address this in future. No promises though. Last year I had some extra French content to show, but I'm afraid this patch I was a bit short on time to bring you more. Boo! Don't we want more French content? Do we? Speaking of Poland, have you found any secret event in the Barbarossa yet? The secret event! Oh man, when this expansion first came out, I did a test run of this and I practiced it 1-for-1. And I just didn't get around to it. I don't know why. I don't know what got in the way, but I just never made the version of it. Is anyone wants to see the Bearer of Artillery achievement for Monarchist Poland, just let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll get on that again. So if you've noticed, this dev diary is a little bit later than usual, so I get to go into some of the replies and do a little bit more Q&A. I find that the questions the community asks tend to be the most spicy ones anyway. The community is unfiltered and just goes for the throat. Let's find out what they say. So what about performance late game? This is a real problem, not early game. This should be better due to this and a few other improvements made. Truth be told, I was hoping to get our hardware lab to give us a new assessment like we did last year, but sadly, it'd be kind of busy with the Victoria 3 thing coming soon. Winking face. Is he hiding something? Matthew, what are you up to? I don't see true better performance late game. What about that? Are you going to answer? Or is Paradox going to say the same old, we only use one CPU? Oh god, this again. Ugh. Although in 2016, like every other CPU had multiple cores. Oh my god, this question. You'll be pleased to hear that Hoi 4 has been using multiple cores since release, and we have since tried to move more game systems to the multi-threaded update pass, but has not always been the option. Is it going to be as good as the CK3 core optimization? Most likely not. But then again, that game is based on tech that is 5 years younger than Hoi. Do you have a list of things that need to be optimized that you try to get to when playing the next Hoi, trying the next patch or DLC? Or do you have a big note somewhere hanging around that says performance, but you don't know yet what to do, and when someone is assigned to a task, they just look through the code, profiles trying to find something? At this point, we do two things. First, we track overnight performance and tackle regressions introduced by new features and changes. This is what I was saying before. I feel like the new features kind of derail performance. I did notice on the profile, supply had a big impact when No Step Back came out. Then we use tools from time to time to make a visual snapshot of what takes time in Hoi and see what we can do from there. Here's an example of a capture of one of those. My goodness. Data, graphs, fun stuff, right? Over time, there are bits that we know are not great, and some of them we have addressed more or less as we found them. Some we keep in our mind for later, as it would be a risky change, and some where we more or less have to accept that it's not realistic to change at this point. As for how much we spend on it, I'll be honest, it comes down to the big money question. What will at the end generate more revenue, a faster game or more frequent DLC releases? Going back and fixing older content? Here's a little speculation. And this is not inside information. This is just a hunch. I have a feeling we're coming to the end of the big updates for Hearts of Iron 4. And I think we're moving towards more smaller DLCs that don't have big impacts on the game as like previous one. This kind of makes me sad because it doesn't give me that brand new game experience when I load up a DLC. However, this is good, for instance, for optimizing the game in the back end. If there's not going to be any massive new features, You think about it, in that case, they've got way more time to work on tweaking the back end and optimize it more and more without having to risk breaking the whole thing and the whole thing come crashing down. If you think about it, code is like the foundations of a building. And if you tinker with that, the whole thing can come crashing down. You've got to be very, very careful of what you touch and adjust and modify, because otherwise you're going to have a very unstable game. So, where's the French content? I'm joking. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hey, you made it to the end. Now, this is the video you want.